You want to hear my hot take? Books are products and should be treated as such. Hey everyone, welcome back to Andrew's Wizardly Reads, and today, guys, we are getting into a little bit of a touchy subject. But before we get into that, please like this video and subscribe to the channel, as it does help the channel grow. And of course, you can check in the description box down below links to all of my social media, including links to the Discord, the Patreon, if you want to help support the channel in a more substantial way that goes towards software licenses and new equipment repair, video editing. It's all going back into the channel. So you can check that right in the description box down below. And just a huge shout out to all of my patrons. Thank you for all of your support. Now, with that out of the way, we are going to touch on a little bit of a touchy subject. And we're going to talk about 3 authors that I feel like this applies to. And before you come for me, I know this is going to be something that can cause some people to flip some tables. And I'm not coming at this from a sort of malicious place. It is just something that I feel to be true. The main subject matter of this video is that books are products. Yes, the story is coming from a creative and it should be treated with respect and enjoyed by people and be its own separate thing. But at the same time, the writing process is not a singular sort of enterprise. It is not something that just one person can do all themselves. Well, I guess you could, but you probably shouldn't if you don't want to go insane. And that means, like, there's marketing people, there's editors, there's like 5 different types of editors. Something that I've noticed recently is that when an author gets to be too big, people become yes men to these authors, and basically the author can go, well, that's the story I wanted to tell, and you can't change a single word. And I don't think that's necessarily to the benefit of the story always. In some cases, I think this is a good thing. An author puts their foot down and goes, dang it, this plot point needs to be here, and I'll prove it to you. And they make it work, and it makes the story even better. Fantastic. 100% stand up for your story. But when it comes to editing and when it comes to certain inclusion of certain elements, I mean, certain authors just need to be told no. And I can already hear you in the comments. Please let me know if you have any other authors that this applies to. I can already hear the people saying, you're making this video now because of Brandon Sanderson. The 3 authors I'm about to talk about are Stephen King, Robin Hobb, there's the table flippers, and Brandon Sanderson. Now, I have read at least 16 books from each one of these authors. Case in point, I've read 16 books by Robin Hobb. I've read over 40 from Stephen King, and I think I've read around 20 to 25 from Brandon Sanderson. And I think Sanderson has just now reached this status where it's going to become an issue in the future if he doesn't pivot and address and make some changes now, which we'll touch on in a little bit. But essentially, we're going to start with the other authors first. And we're going to start with the table flippers, the Robin Hobb fans, which I am actually a huge fan of Robin Hobb. I think the first 9 books of the Realm of the Elderlings, which I've done a video on this before, are fantastic. The issue is basically this right here. This was the end of Tawny Man. And Tawny Man is where I first noticed the cracks in the series. Basically, that's when Robin Hobb stopped playing to her strengths. Here is where it kind of, we started to get into a little bit of, I'm not familiar with the industry, but essentially the Rainwild Chronicles was supposed to be 2 books. And I think if Robin Hobb had been able to go, no, I'm not writing 4 books, I'm writing 2, instead of trying to please the publisher, this is where I think the author should have put her foot down and been like, no, thank you, and just done the duology like she wanted to. We would have gotten a much better product in Rainwild Chronicles. My big issue is when we get into the Fitz and the Fool trilogy. And the first time I noticed the issues that run rampant through the Fitz and the Fool trilogy was here in Tawny Man. And it was minuscule in Tawny Man. It was just a crack. I'm going to elaborate. Robin Hobb is an amazing character writer. When she writes characters, you can sit with Fitz tending a farm for 250 pages, and that is a beautiful reading experience, which she can do that like nobody else possibly can. However, when she needs to progress the plot and she can't do it with the character moments, she will flip from a character writer to a plot writer. And that immediately jars me out. Now, Robin Hobb does try and do something kind of clever. She will take a big emotional scene and she'll throw something emotional right at you at the same time. And there'll be this big emotional blow up to try and kind of mask that we've switched from character story to plot story. And it will switch back really quickly. But when that happens, it all of a sudden feels clunky. And here I feel like somebody should have told Robin Hobb, hey, you need to stick to your strengths. You need to stick to the character writing. And this is especially egregious in Fitz and the Fools. There are many moments that the first one appears at the end of the first book of the Fitz and the Fools series, where something happens that is completely outside of the main character's natural characterization. The main character wouldn't react this way. This then leads to a delay in the middle of the book, which then leads to the events that happen throughout the rest of the trilogy. And then there's an egregious one in the final book. The character moments are still on point. Robin Hobb can write amazing characters, but when it comes to trying to move forward the plot, she is a little weaker and she needs to take more time with editing to make the experience smoother so that it doesn't feel forced, like a forced split the party. If you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. That's why Robin Hobb is included in this particular discussion, is basically people are just not willing to tell her, hey, you need to go back and you need to rework this. This is something that just doesn't match your characterization, which that could be a continuation editor or something like that. Like that's not something that Fitz would do. And she can say, yeah, I'm the author. I know what Fitz would do. Somebody should come back in and say, hey, prove it. Where is the backing of evidence? We've got 6 books with Fitz now. Where have you shown the reader that this is how Fitz would react? Well, it's all in my head. Well, no, that just doesn't work for me as a reader. And this is just me personally. Feel free to let me know in the comments your thoughts down below. But now we're going to talk about Stephen King. Stephen King, the king of horror, which it's all in the name. He's the king of horror. You can't tell Stephen King no. But it's gotten to the point now where we're going to start with the most egregious. I recently had dinner with somebody. And I was like, yeah, I'm looking forward to reading Holly. They leaned in and they said, I will buy your copy of Holly so you don't have to read it because it's just something that should have never been published. And that's kind of like the all-encompassing statement right there. When you are Stephen King, when you are a name, when you have the license to literally put your name on something and it is guaranteed to make money, people aren't going to tell you no. And I still haven't read Holly. But I feel like somebody should have told him no, just based off of that one interaction with somebody that I had. Going even further, Stephen King has had books published. He doesn't even remember writing. He was in a drug-fueled haze when he wrote Cujo. Now, I'm sure editors went in and they cleaned the crap out of this up. They cleaned it up, they made it presentable, and they pushed it out. King doesn't remember writing Cujo. And the fact that I'm holding it in my hand, I feel is a problem. Hey, I don't like Cujo. This is probably one of my least favorite Stephen King books. But just to get published when you were so high you don't even remember writing the book, A, speaks to some kind of skill, but also B, like, there should be stopgaps in place. I can only imagine what the editing team had to do to even get this in the shape that it is currently in. Like, it's astonishing. But that was definitely not during a good period of King. We've also got 1990 when we get this version of The Stand, where we added back in 400 pages into The Stand. Did it need those 400 pages? I mean, maybe it needed 200 of those 400 pages. But there are certain points in here where I'm like, that doesn't need to be here. And that's why I actually want to read the original version of The Stand to see what that reading experience is like. I can only imagine how fascinating it would be to read The Stand without those 400 pages. And of course, we're going to hold up the egregious It. Everybody loves It, but It is also bloated. This is where King was at the height of his power. Nobody could tell King no. It's gotten to the point now where, like, I don't really like the ending of It. It feels like an editor could have looked at King and been like, what? And he never really explains the ending of It. It gets really psychedelic, and there's that scene. Like, I shouldn't be able to just go, yeah, there's that scene, and people immediately cringe. And I feel like a good editor would have been able to look at King and been like, remove this. What purpose does it serve? You need to go back and you need to write something that fits a little better, other than, air quotes, that scene. The scene, like, isn't particularly graphic, but at the same time, its inclusion alone feels off. And this is where editors can come in and help Even legendary authors tighten up and clean up their works, which leads us directly into Brandon Sanderson, who has now reached this legendary status. He is arguably the king of fantasy right now. He is just got, like, he's got his own convention at this point. Dragonsteel Nexus. He's got his own special edition company. He's got his own book company. Brandon Sanderson is getting to the point where he's gotten so big that people are unwilling to tell him no. And if you listen to Brandon Sanderson, he will tell you he's now edited more than he's ever been before. But he will also, in the same statement, tell you that this is the story I wanted to tell, so I'll ignore people. Well, that doesn't make for a good product, because now you've got Wind and Truth, which has been what I would arguably call the most divisive release of a Brandon Sanderson product. This is the most immediate pushback I've ever seen to a Sanderson product, which I saw the writing on the wall appear on Rhythm of War. We broke the formula of the first 3 Stormlight books, and it took a while for people to be like, yeah, okay, maybe Rhythm of War wasn't that great. This was an immediate pushback. I haven't even finished it yet, but I can tell you right now, I've seen videos where I've seen an indie author go in and remove 30% of the writing without actually changing the story. It tightens everything up, and it's amazing. I'll link that video in the description box down below if you want to go watch it. It's basically a 1-hour dissertation on what is wrong with this book. I'm not going to touch on the diversity and inclusion aspects of the book. I haven't even really reached those sections, and if they're integrated well, that doesn't really bother me all that much. But what we're going to talk about here is we're going to talk about just bloat. This needed a brutal editor. This needed somebody, because Sanderson's prose goes from beautiful and rhythmic and lyrical to clunky and very easily digestible, all within the single page. Like, it just goes back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And I feel like this needed not only more development time, because he says that he felt rushed with Wind and Truth, but at the same time, how could you be rushed? You were writing it for 3 years, and I mean, frankly, you're Brandon Sanderson. If you feel rushed, just take another year. I feel like people would have been much happier waiting 4 years rather than 3 years. And you're Brandon Sanderson. What's Tor going to do to you at this point? Like, I don't understand the thought of like, hey, I felt rushed. You obviously wrote the book. Like, the book was turned in, and people at Tor or people within Dragonsteel should have been like, hey, this isn't ready to go. We're going to push it out, and we're going to wait, and we're going to deliver a better product. Because I'm not saying this is a bad story. I'm not saying that he doesn't stick the landing. Obviously, I haven't gotten through it enough to know so. I have gotten through it enough to tell you that this book is bloated. I am 530 pages into this book, and I would say I'd have been cool with about 250 of it. Like, that's kind of where I'm standing at. We did structure changes, which I don't think was a particularly good idea. And I don't know, the flashback chapters doesn't really change anything. There are certain things that are done in this, and there's, the danger of expansion of scope and stuff like that, where it's just like we're trying to make it more and more and more expansive, bringing in more and more of the Cosmere, but the modernisms in here, the humor isn't going to appeal to a broad fantasy audience. I don't feel like. I've seen maybe it be 70-30 where people are like, I found that funny. And then 70% of the people going, yeah, that was super cringy. So this just needed an edit. This needed more editing. He says that Trust of the Emerald Sea was edited more. But again, I just don't think that he listened to the editors then, because it may have been edited more, but it doesn't feel like a quality product. And I feel like this is something that happens to legendary authors the bigger that they get. This is just my thoughts and my opinions. Please feel free to have a discourse with me in the comment section down below. I would love to talk with you guys about this subject, about either other authors that you think might fit into this category. These are just the first 3 that come to mind that I'm very well read in. And yeah, I hope you guys are doing well. Until next time, peace out, stay magical, bye. And as always, I want to give a huge thank you to my patrons. Thank you for supporting my passion and my hobby. It means the world to me.